All right, everyone, welcome to the Talent Forge. In this episode, we are featuring Michael Ioffe of Arist. And Arist is a really cool company that's been around celebrating its fifth year right now. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Awesome, Michael. When I got to meet you working with Ford, it was one of the coolest things to hear the story of Eris. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about your background and history and how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, of course. So zooming out a bit, I've been obsessed with this question of how do you deliver learning in war zones for a while, and it started initially when I was in high school. I started a nonprofit designed to teach people about entrepreneurship, and we essentially hosted these free live conversations between students and entrepreneurs all over the world. We had about 500 locations in 50 countries, and one of our locations was in the war zone in Yemen. And I became captivated by this question of how do you deliver learning in a place with no laptops, right, with no internet access, with a sort of education system that wasn't really intact locally. And I started realizing that if we could deliver learning via text message, we could make learning dramatically more accessible because everybody had access to a phone. And so I got really, really excited about sort of this opportunity. Um, and essentially that's sort of where Eris started. It was initially just a way to deliver learning via text message. And we started realizing over time that this model that we had created for delivering learning in bite-sized chunks was incredibly, incredibly effective. And if we could find a way to make learning more accessible, at the enterprise level, we could reach a much larger audience of people that, in many cases, never went to college, never finished high school, but really needed a better, more accessible way to learn. So that's sort of the very quick genesis.
So it's sad that we have to find a way to deliver learning in a war zone still in this modern age, but you've tackled that problem and you have a really unique model with your company. And one of the things I guarantee that most people probably ask you right out of the gate is how do you actually deliver learning by text? And, what does that look like in your regard?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, yeah, the biggest question we always get is, can you actually deliver learning via text message? And we were incredibly skeptical initially. I think the idea of delivering a whole course via text seemed insane, candidly. Um, so what we started realizing is if you look at sort of most topics, right, even relatively complex topics, let's say neuroscience, right, very, very complex topic. The reality is that that overall complex topic is really made up of a bunch of small individual concepts and case studies and data points that over time build to form a more complex understanding of what a subject is. But the reality is the best explanations are actually very, very simple, right? I was chatting with a mathematician yesterday about Fermat's last theorem, and even like a relatively complex theorem can be explained in a few sentences if done sort of by a very, very intelligent, thoughtful learning designer. And we started realizing that conciseness was sort of critical to good learning design, and that this method really forced conciseness. So essentially, a typical text message course consists of a brief lesson. So it's 1,200 characters, uh, almost about two screen lengths worth of text. An image or a GIF that can be an infographic, an engaging GIF, and then a series of interactive questions. So every single lesson includes a multiple choice question with instant feedback, a scenario question with instant feedback, and then an exercise that you actually practice in the real world, and then come back to Eris and reflect. And so the goal is that you get, a really concise, very digestible piece of knowledge. You practice it, do that scenario practice as well, practice it in the real world then, and then come back for reflection, right? And we found based on research that is not only incredibly effective from an adoption point of view, but actually drives real behavior change, right? Because it's digestible, spaced out over time, and just dramatically more engaging. If you've ever used a Duolingo, it's kind of the same principles that make Duolingo really effective, but designed for pretty much any topic in an enterprise model.
And that's really fascinating. So it's almost like when we think about the brain as a large, complex organ, and there's so much going on in there, but then we can break that down to hemispheres, and then we can break that down to cortexes, and then we can break that down to neurons, and then we can break that down to all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more understandable and digestible rather than trying to study the entire complexity of the brain. And you're doing that with complex areas like neuroscience and psychology and a number of others. How have attendees or participants that have engaged in that, how have they engaged with that concept of micro learning?
Yeah, it's the data has been incredible. So today, Arist has the highest completion, adoption, engagement, behavior change, confidence lift, and satisfaction rates of any digital learning platform. Period. It's been remarkable how something as simple as changing the delivery mechanism for learning changes the entire learning experience. It really doesn't matter how. I mean, the content has to be engaging, right? But it really doesn't matter how complex the content is or what the subject is. People are very, very likely to engage and enjoy the experience if the course is delivered in a way that meets them where they are. And that's kind of been the biggest takeaway is delivery and user experience really matters. I think one of the things that we think about often is, there's a reason why one-click checkout on Amazon works really, really well, right? It's because
I
it's
was
one
just
click.
going to go to that too. It's so
Yeah,
funny.
it makes it so easy, right? And it's the same principle here. How can we make learning one click for people?
Well, and when you think about it, right, everybody's busy, and I will say this, and I'm going to comment on something here because as an old school trainer, Michael, there's probably a few old school trainers out there that are going, "What the hell am I going to do with my life once this all takes over and I'm no longer needed?" But I know that we still need content designers, developers, deliverers, and all that. So we'll get into that in a second. But what I wanted to bring up was when we think about, say, the time constraints that people are under, right? Like people are told to do more with less. So the very idea of having to go to an LMS, log into the LMS, then go to your profile, go to find whatever courses that you want, or go to do X, Y, and Z, and then actually watch, pay attention, engage, and whatever kind of level of engagement that's built into that course, that's a lot of ask. And when people aren't able to do that sort of in real time, they have to actively behave and think to go to that LMS and do that. Whereas yours is delivered sort of almost in real time. It's delivered via text message or by WhatsApp or by, and I know that you've got a number of mediums. How has that essentially, like when somebody maybe comes in as a non believer in the concept, and then all of a sudden they're hit with these lessons, they're learning important skills in real time. How is that sort of shifted maybe mindsets? Have you seen that occur?
Yeah, 100%. So I think the first thing is when you explain errors verbally, it makes little sense, right? When you try it, it really clicks. And that's been, I think we've honestly had a lot of people that have been very, very skeptical until they've tried it and they're like, oh, wow, this actually works super well. It makes a lot of sense. Um, the question that we always ask is if you are a learning professional, how many courses have you taken in your LMS over the past year? And the answer is almost always zero, right? And so it's kind of this like thing where, if it's like a chef who never eats their own food, right? Like if you're building all this content and you're never taking it, how can you expect anybody else to take it, right? You are the learning professional. It is your job to create and deliver an experience learning and make it better, right? And so to be completely candid, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in the way that a lot of like learning teams operate, and it's uncomfortable to call out and it's uncomfortable to discuss, but it's the truth, right? And so a lot of the process of helping people sort of believe, if you will, is kind of calling out like, hey, like you're not actually using the stuff you're creating currently. What you are using is TikTok and Duolingo. So why don't you do the same thing internally, right?
Well, and that's the funny thing, right? Like, is the number of courses that I have signed up for that were on an LMS or on demand. I generally just try to click through, get to what I actually want to look at, or anything else like that. And I honestly feel 80% of it is probably not relevant, not useful, not functional for me in most cases. And I'm not going to say in all cases, but that's been particularly frustrating, especially when the system's not operating. This with Arist, and I have taken some of the courses. I love them. They're very much in line with some of the things that I know as a behavioral scientist, like for example, micro learning. Right? Don't try to feed somebody from the fire hose when you really just need them to maybe act on one behavior or two behaviors. So I want to go to that in just a second, but stay with the if you're a trainer and you're somebody who is a creator of content or anything else like that, you're not necessarily saying, hey, get rid of all face to face in training. You're not saying that there's no space for that, but you are saying that this is a fantastic opportunity for behavioral nudge, reinforcement. Can you speak to that just a little bit so that way, my listeners don't go, I'm out of here?
Yeah, of course, of course. So the way that we think about it is that if you look at the bucket of training that has to happen within an enterprise, um, you know, 80% of training is really foundational stuff, right? It's compliance, basic leadership development, right? Getting people on the same page about company updates, right? Really core skills like giving and receiving feedback, right? Like core soft skills, core behaviors. Um, it's stuff that like the way that we think about it is everything that you would use like a LinkedIn Learning for, or a Udemy for, or like a Udacity for, or a Coursera for. Like all of that stuff exists online, and that means that if it exists online, it can probably be done by Arist, right? So that 80% is the stuff that we want to replace with stuff that's more engaging, more in the flow of work, more relevant,
Right.
and takes less, honestly, just wastes less time. However, um, on the flip side, there's 20% of training that's highly meaningful, deeply hands-on, and oftentimes has to be either live or in person. And we need more of that, right? So the way that we think about it is we think the middle is falling out, right? There's this
Mm-hmm.
huge middle of like e-learning and courses that people just don't take. And we want everything to either be super bite-size in Eris or deeply meaningful in person where everybody's super focused on being in the moment, right? And that's
Immersive. Yeah,
immersive. Yeah,
immersive, active, engaged, and where
scenario
you're
based.
actually exploring. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
and I think that was such a fascinating look at this, right? Like the blending of technology. We know that AI is here. We know that there's a number of other factors here that has every industry going, okay, where's my position in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? But this is not technology that was developed yesterday. And I know that your platform uses AI, but I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking about delivery mechanism through text and delivery mechanism that's right on time, right on target. I want to get into that just a moment because I thought one of the coolest things about the Arist approach is that you actually get to use the data that comes in from, are people engaging, are they answering the questions correctly, are they, does this person excel more in this topic than this person, does this person need more support? What an incredible resource to gather that data. Can you talk a little bit about that, Michael?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most interesting things is that today, if you look at most learning experiences, we really only capture one point of data, right? Like the exit survey or the assessment at the end of the course, right? With Eris, we capture data, multiple points of data in every bite-sized lesson, right? And so we just have way more data on where the knowledge gaps are. And for our clients, that's enabled them to actually, in real time, pinpoint exactly where knowledge gaps exist per team, per location, per individual, and fill those knowledge gaps in real time, right? So it's just an unprecedented level of data fidelity that you just historically never had. And you can use that to inform the business. You can use that to make adjustments and interventions in real time. Um, and I think to your point, the thing that we get really excited about is the ability to then use that data to automatically create interventions and automatically address course experiences. Today, we have a suite called Arist Automations that lets you trigger learning based on any data source in Arist or within the organization. And so you can do really cool stuff like when a manager's first promoted, instantly enroll them in a new manager onboarding course, right? When a rep is struggling with a discovery in like based on like Gong or call recording calls or call recording data, you can instantly trigger a course on how to do more effective discovery. So you can essentially like use all the data internally to actually create better learning outcomes and performance outcomes. I think just one thing that I'll mention here is we find that there's an obsession with number of hours of learning delivered with most enterprise learning teams.
Mm.
What we forget is that learning is designed to improve performance. We are enterprise learning teams designed to improve enterprise performance. And the best way to improve enterprise performance is to actually have a very clear understanding of where performance is lacking and then fill in those gaps accordingly. And that's been kind of what's missing for most teams.
Well, it's huge. That's the modern day needs assessment. Even places like the Association for Talent Development with their ADDIE model. And,
Yeah.
I actually spoke with Dr. Esther earlier, guest, who we got really deep into needs analysis. And how cool is it that you're able to actually take a needs analysis from behavioral data within the organization or trigger points within the organization? This person just got promoted, let's load a manager training for this person. And it can
Yeah.
be very individualized, which is pretty cool too. I want to stick
Yeah.
with this concept of micro learning, right? Like, so I know that there's a number of freelance practitioners and even people within organizations, which obviously will share your information. So if they want to get in touch with you, but for those that are maybe in that freelance space, What lessons would you share with somebody about the concept of micro learning? Like, how would you help them to maybe think about their redesign of their content, or how would a person that is delivering face to face really capitalize on some of the value propositions of your philosophical approach?
Yeah, sure. Sort of three things that we recommend when it comes to microlearning. The first one is that you have to start with the outcome in mind and work backwards, right? So if you're building a course, you have to start with like what is the actual behavior that we want people to take, and then work backwards and then be super, super intentional and very concise from there, right? I think far too many people approach microlearning in the other way where they're like, hey, we're gonna have a subject matter expert give us a ton of content and we're gonna chop it up into bite-sized chunks. Just chopping something up into smaller chunks that's not micro learning, right? That's taking existing learning and just making it small, right? Micro
Right.
learning is being intentional, right? And that's I think it's something that a lot of people miss.
To
Second thing
that
that
to
oh yeah,
that
sorry, go
point,
ahead. Yeah,
I'm gonna bring come back to your second point, but
yeah,
to that, it's so interesting because that's true of not just micro learning. That's also true of like those long, deep, facilitated
yeah,
sessions. I mean, that's one of the questions today in our behavioral science special interest group at the ATD. We
yeah,
actually dug right into that. Like when Kirby vacuum salesmen were like, "Hey, we need sales training. We need sales training," and actually somebody came in and said, why? Your numbers are fantastic. You need to knock on more doors. That's the only thing
yeah,
you need to do. The behavior is knocking on doors because when you do that, you've been successful. And
right,
it's just
right,
like, okay, so how do
yeah,
we get to that point? So I,
yeah,
I love what you're saying there. Start with the behavior that you want to change, that you want to modify, that you want to adopt, or that you want to disintegrate from an organization and work from there. All right, number two,
yeah.
go for it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Number two is sort of aligned with that in the sense that the biggest myth with microlearning is that you can't teach full courses, whatever that means, right? You can't teach complex content as we mentioned earlier. Um, that's just wrong, right? Microlearning is a philosophy of just being more concise, right? It's not making things smaller; it's being more concise and more intentional, right? And to me, the thing that frustrates me the most is when somebody's like, "Oh, we made a microlearning." And it's like a 20-minute video, right? Or like a 10-minute video. It's like that's not micro learning, right? Like you're just cutting things up into
It's
smaller
20
chunks.
minutes.
Or it's 20 minutes. It's a long period of that's
Yeah.
I'm 25. In my world, that's a hell of a lot of time. You know, uh, and so I think that's the other myth is you have to you have to approach micro learning with the belief that this is all anyone's going to get, right? Even if it's being used as a reinforcement to a live session, you should build the micro learning with the anticipation that this is all anyone's going to get, and it's an end-to-end course, holistic within itself. And the third core component is, and this is we're biased, but my belief is that if you are delivering micro learning via an LMS or via a third-party platform, you are losing all of the benefit of micro learning, right? The benefit of micro learning is that it's small and it can embed into somebody's day-to-day life. And if that's the case, then it should be embedded into their day-to-day life, which is usually via text message, Teams, or Slack or email on the platform somebody already uses, right? And so if you take a 20-minute video or even a 5-minute or 3-minute video, but you send it in a place that takes 20 clicks to access, then like it's going to take as long to access that micro learning as it is going to be to actually engage with it. And so that's sort of what we also consider is um, the most important part of bite-sized learning is the user experience of it. It's a user experience challenge. And the last thing that I'll mention here is that conciseness is really hard, right? And I think that's the reason why people usually take the easy route with bite-sized learning. They're like, oh, I made this thing smaller. You know, the reality, we did this exercise with a client where we gave everybody a group of learning designers, 3 or 4 paragraphs of text, and we're like, hey, make this into, we had people compete to see who could make it as concise as possible. And one learning designer got it down to 60 characters with no loss of impact. 4 paragraphs to 60 characters. 60 characters is like a sentence, right? Less, it's a small sentence, right? And that's the reality of what microlearning forces people to do. You can be really, really effective, really concise in a really short space.
Why say it in 100 words when you can say it in 10? Yeah. And,
Yeah,
it's funny because this is the underlying philosophy of what I try to teach all of the trainers that are coming in is if it's simple, people will do it. If it's
yeah,
easy, people will do it. If it's hard, if there's a lot of friction, meaning that you don't have that one click buy, it takes you 15 clicks to get to the cart and make the sale and the transaction, people are going to quit. They're not going to
Yeah.
follow through. If it's not happening in real time or when it's convenient for them, they're going to do it tomorrow. And we all know
Yeah.
what tomorrow means. It means it doesn't get done, or
Yeah.
they cram it all together in, one evening or anything else like that to try to just get through it, as opposed to spending the time engaging the content.
Yeah.
When I think about, even this is actually something that I've been doing, even in my face-to-face facilitation. So like on a 4-hour session, we might be having some really deep dialogue. We might be getting into some issues, but instead it used to be where it's like, all right, I want 10 things that I want my audience to walk away with. That's not the case. And I've stopped doing that many years ago. And I now got it down to, here are the 3 things that you need to do to be successful. Now let's spend more time on those 3 issues, so that way you get really good at them and they become really comfortable for you in that 4-hour session,
Yeah.
rather than, here's 10 things, good luck, go do one of those 10 things and it's going to make you better. But it
Yeah.
does it when you're a learning development and a learning designer or a trainer. You know so much content, but you didn't build that content up yesterday. You
Yeah.
built it up over the course of a career, but you want to give all of that idea. How do you help maybe trainers when they walk in and they're starting to walk into that micro learning? How do you get somebody to step back and say, "Yes, everything that you have to teach, all your knowledge is so important, but get it down to 3 things, or get it down to one thing, or get it down to
Yeah.
that simple." How do you get somebody to sort of take that step, Michael?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I don't think we figured it out fully yet. I think that the reality of the situation is, right, is that if you are an expert at something, right, you firmly believe that all of your knowledge is mission critical, right? Like you believe that everything that you have to share is really, really important. And it's very, very uncomfortable to be like, actually, most of what I know is completely irrelevant to this audience, right? This audience will only be able to take away 1 or 2 things, and I really want them to do these 2 or 3 things, right? So I think it's just like it's an uncomfortable behavioral shift, right? That somebody has to go through. And the only way that we've seen it work is by being super blunt, right? About the fact that, hey, you are about to deliver learning to this audience, no matter what you think, right? Like this audience actually only cares about knowing these 2 to 3 things. And we've noticed, I mean, candidly, a lot of practitioners don't ask the audience what the audience wants to know, right? So we end up in funny situations every once in a while where, we talk with a subject matter expert or a learning facilitator or a leader, and they're like, hey, like we want to deliver all of these topics on all of these courses, and people love our training. People love it when we go super in depth. And then we interview the learners, and the learners are like, no, this is like the worst training I've ever had. I'm sitting in a room for 6 hours, and this is not practical or relevant. Like this could have been an email, you know. Um, and the reality is if you're a facilitator, or a learning leader, and you go and ask your audience, oh, like what do you want to learn? You're gonna hear what you want to hear, A, and then B, if you ask for feedback after, people are going to tell you what you want to hear. Like fundamentally, like people are nice, they're not going to give you blunt feedback. And that's where sort of we end up in a funny situation sometimes where we get this super blunt feedback from learners, and a lot of our job ends up being kind of communicating that blunt feedback to learning leaders, and that's sort of the only way we've seen it work so far. So
Well, and it's funny you say that, because when we look at actually the stats on training effectiveness and whether it creates behavioral change, and this is from the research, 9 out of 10 trainings absolutely fail to make any impact or any difference. And when you think about that, and you start taking a step back and you go, well, wait a second. That's not 9 out of 10 trainers. But if you're a trainer, 9 out of 10 of your trainings, based on a massive study of these different things, did not produce results. You got to start looking at yourself and going, I'm part of that 9 out of 10. Somewhere in there, I am part of that 9 out of 10. Or, but that's a difficult lens to look through. So I love the concept of the sort of like radical candor when it comes to
yeah,
feedback. And it seems to me that people are probably a little more blunt when it comes to text message feedback or reactive feedback
Yeah.
in that space. So, Michael, when I'm looking at this and all that you've accomplished in the last 5 years, and I heard you say that you're 25, which is so impressive. Where do you see sort of, if you were to make predictions, what's the future? Because we talk about shaping the future of talent development. What are some of the future trends that you see in this talent development and learning development space?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the sort of optimistic side, and I'm going to go into the pessimistic side.
Okay.
The optimistic side is that I think the technology and the data exists today. Everything already exists. It's just a matter of implementing it. Where we can take internal data and deliver the right learning at the right place in the right time for every single individual. So I believe that learning within enterprises will become far more pushed and not pulled. What we've noticed with employees is that people don't go into the LMS to learn. Like people don't go into the LXP to learn. All of these LXP platforms don't have a lot of adoption, right? In the long run, right? That's just the reality of it. Right. What happens is that they get a lot of adoption in the first month or two, and then it falls off a cliff because the typical employee, most employees actually, don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they need to learn to do better at their
Mm.
job, and they don't know what their skill gaps are. I mean, I, as the CEO of my company, rely on feedback from my team members to know where my skill gaps are, right?
Yep.
And ideally within an organization, every single individual gets learning pushed to them at the right place at the right time based on where their skill gaps are, right? And so we believe that fundamentally, and you'll have knowledge management tools and like tools like ChatGPT where somebody can go and pull knowledge. But the reality is, people actually, if you look at the data, people pull knowledge very rarely and need to be pushed knowledge a lot. And that's sort of where we see the future going. It's also one of the reasons why TikTok won over YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
TikTok won over YouTube because when you pull up TikTok, you get like a feed of content that's perfectly
Constant.
curated and designed for you. Yeah,
Yep.
it's easy to engage with. You don't need to figure out and search something or find something. Like there's no searching or discovery involved.
It
It's
finds you.
perfectly finds you exactly. And so we think learning will go the same way, and that reality is doable today. It's just a matter of learning teams catching up and implementing that technology. From our point of view, I think that's going to be hugely game changing because adoption will go up, engagement will go up, and most importantly, performance will go up because we're actively filling performance gaps and knowledge gaps in real time. Where I'm pessimistic is, kind of to the point that you were making earlier. Today, the 9 out of 10 trainings fail, right? And for most trainings internally, because of the modalities that we use to deliver training, uh, you know, we actually don't have any data within enterprises to prove that learning teams are making an impact. And so we have this really unfortunate cycle where every few years, as soon as there's a market like dip, a bunch of learning teams get fired, downsized, or lose budget. And everybody gets blindsided. Everybody's like, oh my God, like this is terrible. How is our organization not investing in learning? Like we're so blindsided, right? And it's like, yeah, but if I've seen some of these reports that enterprise learning teams give to their CEOs or their CHROs. They're not demonstrating any real impact to the business, right? And so if you as a business unit are not demonstrating business impact on a regular basis, you are in a very precarious position. I think most L&D teams that we work with don't realize that. They think
Mm-hmm.
their mandate is to deliver learning and do what the business tells them to do, and then they're blindsided when they get fired. The reality is their job is to create performance within the organization, right? And to prove with the data that their training interventions delivered performance impact. And that today doesn't happen for most organizations. And it makes me very scared for the future of the profession, right? So I hope that doesn't continue to be the case. But those are sort of my predictions. Yeah.
100% why I started the Elite Training Academy is because every training that's a failure, honestly, makes it harder for me to do training in the future.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
self-serving,
Yeah.
but I mean the reality is if we don't fix what has been broken for a while, and if we don't acknowledge it, if we put our heads in the sand and just say,
Yeah.
oh, no, 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 we'll keep doing it the same way that training has been done since
Yeah.
the 1910s, and don't actually look at what it is to create behavior change and return on investment, training is going to get cut, whether it's at the
Yeah.
individual organization or whether it's at sort of a more global mass scale of hey, we tried this whole learning and development thing. Let's just give people,
Yeah.
let's give people 48 hours a year to go and, learn whatever it is that they want to learn. And that's going to be the end
Yeah.
of it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with you 100%. And if I'm to wrap a bow on this kind of conversation, and this is part of the reason why I really wanted you to join me on a Talent Forge, Michael, is because when you and I talked, it was just like, wow, this concept of micro learning and getting people to engage because when it's easy and accessible, and when we're asking them to actually do some kind of behavioral change, wow, what a novel concept. Or listening to the audience and actually hearing what it is that you need, want, or what's not working for you and solving that pain point. I'm loving these conversations, the inclusion of technology in there. How do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about Arist, if they want to learn more about you? Where's a good place to catch Michael?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, super accessible. So I'm on email. I'm Michael at Arist, Arist .co, short for Aristotle. And then yeah, so feel free to shoot me an email, and then you can always try an Arist course online at Arist, Arist.co as well.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. But I want to say thank you so much, Michael, for shaping the future of talent development and training and learning opportunities. And I really appreciate you being on the show. And obviously, we'll be following along and hope to have you back for another conversation soon. So thanks, Michael.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.